Anyway,
should we talk about long life games?
yes, let's talk about long life games and the challenges of long life games. So, long life games is something that we talk a lot about. For those that don't know, it's kind of it's what it says on the tin. Long life games is a game which is released and then lives a long time. Essentially, people keep playing it, keep buying it years and years after it's released. So before we start talking maybe about the challenges, Dan, did you want to go through a few like motivators of games that are doing this really well?
Yes, absolutely, and these probably kind of set the tone. There is industry-wide kind of desire to get one of these holy grails of the gift that keeps on giving. I think the one of the classics would be Minecraft. That has just been around for a long time and just done monumentally well in its many years of tenure. Have you got any stats for us on
I
Minecraft?
do have stats. As of May 2020, it had sold 200 million copies of the game, and in the previous 12 months, they saw an increase of 24 million extra copies than they had in the last 12 months. So, similar to what we were talking about in the news with GTA having its most successful year, other than the release year. This might not have been Minecraft's most successful year, but it's growing. And that game came out in, now I'm testing my knowledge, 2010?
I think older than that. I mean,
Older than that.
it's a difficult one to. I mean, the very first. Yeah, I think it was originally released as a Java game. Uh, I think it released sort of low cost online. Joe's probably the one to fill us in on the details of that. But yeah, it's had a long evolutionary life, and even now, last year I think it was saw the release of Minecraft Dungeons, so the whole brand has built, and there's physical toys, and yeah, really strong legacy behind Minecraft. As you've mentioned, we mentioned in the news, you just mentioned it then, GTA 5. We've just had spanning 3 generations of console now. That's definitely a great example of a long life game, and this term long life games kind of we use as an all encompassing term for, as you say, games that have been around for a long time. But there are also different strategies for this. You get games which have updates, games which have service side to it. GTA 5 introduced the online element, which has really helped prolong it, as well as be surviving long enough to see visual upgrades between console generations. It's had a really successful online offering as well. So yeah, GTA 5. Any other stats on that one, or have we covered all of that already?
I think that's just about it for GTA 5. I blew them all in the news. So
That's all
if
right.
you're late, you'll have to go back and watch the news later.
World of Warcraft, another example, originally released in 2004, and I know as saw a recharge resurgence in popularity last year. They had a popular Shadowlands update, but again, 2004. It's going to be as old as you, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's making me look young. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I know people that took weeks off work to play that when that the last update came out. Like people love it, and I do have some World of Warcraft stats. And anyone feel free to correct me if these are wrong. I collect them and don't massively fact check them. Check them in a few places, and but 113 million players, 113, not 130. Sorry, that was my accent. Players, and about 4.32 million players daily are still playing the game. So yeah, that's a really old game, and still to have that many people playing, still work being put into the game, updates coming out as you mentioned. So yeah, that's a great example of long life long
Yeah,
life game. But
almost 20 years of World of Warcraft, and yeah, still pulling in several million players per day is a heck of an achievement. And of course, it's comparatively a much newer kid on the block, but Fortnite has been around a relatively long time in video game years, which are kind of like dog years, I guess, or something. But yeah, Fortnite. I don't know if you've got any stats on that, but you don't have to look far to find a staggering Fortnite stat.
yeah, I couldn't find anything too recent. So I think it was as of like 2019, they were at 250 million players. So I would guess they're probably like 300, 350 million now, maybe. And I checked just before we came on the show live, and there was 5.7 million people playing it at that moment. So yeah, like you say, it's compared to some of the other games, it's more reasonably new, but it's still it's growing and has that huge player base years after its launch. And that's an example of a game that kind of changed its dynamic of what it originally was when it came out and adapted to the market to prolong its life. And clearly that's worked. It's worked a treat.
Yeah,
and whatever they
it's
did, great decision.
and it's absolutely beginning to sort of transcend even video game norms with their kind of live events and music events. Was it 12 million people viewed the Travis Scott event?
Yeah, it was something like that. Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely a really good place to draw inspiration from. So those are kind of I guess the examples that have caught the attention of the games industry and kind of made this long life games become a desirable proposition. Not necessarily always knocked out of the park. So there have been a few attempts at this, some less successful than others. One close to our hearts, Fable Legends, as an example, that never even saw release before the sad decision to close down Lionhead, but that was very much eyes on this idea of a games as a service. How can we not just deliver a linear experience, but create something that can continue to evolve? But yep, clearly not a great success. Fallout 76 is one that is still in operation. Had a bumpy launch, wasn't particularly well received, and but is kind of stuck out there and has had various updates and I guess varying degrees of interest. So it'll be interesting to see if they can bring that into the limelight at some point, or if it will fade into obscurity. We mentioned it in the news, EA's Anthem. So that is one personally. When I saw that first time around when it first was released, I was really interested in the proposition, in the world they were offering, but again, didn't have a particularly great launch, wasn't especially well received, and the developers came out and sort of said, okay, we're going to look at this and we'll come back to you. And they've been working away, and as you said in the news, it's something that's going to be I think we're going to find the next steps for Anthem being decided at the moment. As I understand it, there's a much more scaled down team working on it, so who knows if they're going to sort of reinvigorate it or start to shutter it. And we can't go an episode without mentioning Cyberpunk. Again, very, very much at the early days to see what happened with that. And I don't think it's fair to say that was an unsuccessful launch. Contentious launch for sure. It's definitely had a rocky start. But definitely one that's they will have sold a lot, but we know they've had some real bad press. They've had some real knock-on effects of not perhaps having the release they want, but I'm sure that's one that's got eyes on for pulling that back in, and it will have updates, and definitely one to watch to see how that pans out.
Yeah, definitely. And as we're going to talk about in a second, it's doable. Like we've said before, like it isn't the end for Cyberpunk. It's going to have a long life ahead of it, but it's not going to be easy. And that's some of the things I guess they're dealing with Anthem now is that it's not easy to keep your game alive. When you hear the success stories of like the GTAs and the Fortnites, and it's kind of like, oh, it's easy, and it's not. There's because you kind of have two strands that you need to focus on to do a long life game. You need to keep your existing players playing, and if you do that through updates which are free, obviously that's not generating more revenue, but you've got the reaching factor that they can bring more people in if they're still playing the game. But you also need to get the new players as well. So you've kind of got two streams of focus when you're trying to make your game last longer, is keeping your existing players happy and enticing enough to bring the new players in. So it's really difficult to do. But you've got some good examples, I believe, of games that have done this really well and maybe come back from, like a Cyberpunk, from a rocky start and really
absolutely. And I think these we're referring to them as redemption arcs, so games that have perhaps been in that situation, the Cyberpunk, the Fallout, the Anthem situation, and pulled it out of the bag. And one no greater example I think than our friends with No Man's Sky. That definitely had a contentious, high-profile launch. A lot of people's expectations not met there, but far and away a out and out success in terms of long life games. Is it 10 updates in that they've had?
More than 10 now. I think they're at 12 or 13. We should know. We work with them on all of them.
Lots
It's
of
so many
updates.
we can't keep count.
Yeah,
But they've, as I said, they've done that through purely like free updates. There's, if you bought the game on day one, you've not had to pay a penny more to get all of these huge updates. So clearly their strategy is to keep people playing, and they are bringing new players in because obviously with DLCs and the other companies do, which is a perfectly valid strategy. Like that's a revenue model that you can get existing players to put more money in to get upgrades. Whereas in the No Man's Sky example, like every single one of them has been free. So they've over the last 4 and a bit years have been working on this game to improve it and extend its life, and not seen any more money coming in from their existing player base. So yeah, they're bringing new players in, and that's proven that it's doable. It's difficult and it's a lot of hard work, but you can do it, and it's a perfectly valid way of extending the life of a game.
absolutely. Another example, Sea of Thieves. Again, I think it's fair to say not the perfect launch. I doubt that was kind of checking off everybody's expectations, but it's still around today. It's still very strong, still gets a lot of attention, and it has built a very loyal and excitable fan base. So I would definitely consider that somebody who's turned it around.
Yeah, they've done, I believe, 5 major updates since it launched in 2018. And something that they did, which I thought was really nice, as I said before, about it's not just keeping people playing, it's getting new players in. At the back end of last year, end of 2020, and I think we talked about it in one of our roundups, they opened up this thing called the Pirate Academy, which is kind of like an onboarding tool to get new players into the game, to get them up to speed with how to play it, the best things to do, which I thought was a really nice touch to get people in and playing the game. Because I mean, I often find if I'm behind the curve, and it's like, oh, if I now start playing this game, I'm going to be so far behind everyone else. It's going to make it difficult to play. Whereas they were like, here's instructions and a fun way of onboarding people to the game to get the new players in. So again, that's a great example of how you can get new players in and then the updates to keep your existing players happy and engaged with the game. So you can see the two-pronged approach that they're taking
But yeah,
to extend the life.
we talk with all of our clients, the kind of the two main aims, player acquisition and player engagement. How do we keep onboarding new people, and how do we keep our existing player base happy? And as Pete's mentioning in the comments there, they've done a great job for people who perhaps originally bought the game, tried it out, liked it, didn't like it, but they've kept these updates coming and enticed that existing audience back in. And like you said, that Pirate Academy to not make it intimidating to onboard new players is a really good example. Another one, slightly different approach. The Hitman series of games. They were trying something new with the Hitman game model, kind of a somewhat episodic, phased release. And I think it's fair to say with the launch of Hitman One, which was critically very well received, but didn't sell the numbers that they wanted to. And it was to the point that the studio ended up doing a management buyout, buying the studio directors bought the studio and the license off of Square Enix, carrying out a Squexit, as I believe they referred to it. Um, and yeah, had to downsize the team, had to really scale back operations, but they've since turned around. They released Hitman 2. They got that out there, very well received, and they've just released Hitman 3, which I believe made its investment back in the first week of release. So that's perhaps, I mean, arguably that's 3 different games, but it's kind of a single platform, and they've definitely done this whole redemption arc with that, and it'd be interesting to see what how the Hitman franchise evolves from this point, as they've kind of ended the trilogy on a real high. Another example that we mentioned quite a lot last week, and not so much a redemption arc, but more a case of a decent success on launch, but has a few years on really exploded, is Rust, which you mentioned last week. Um, that's been ticking along fine, doing well, but has just exploded as a result of sort of development, evolution, and engagement activity. Um,
Yeah, they went as we spoke about last week, so we won't go too deep into it. But yeah, with what they were doing on Twitch and the influencers to kind of reinvigorate the game and get new eyes on it, has worked a treat for them. So yeah, that's an example of someone who's had a good steady life and is now shooting up again years and years after they launched by trying something different, which has worked really well for them.
And last example, Call of Duty, which is certainly a
Mm.
franchise that's gone nowhere. That's always been a popular title, but their latest release, Black Ops Cold War, has been a huge success for what could easily have been, and I'm sure many people kind of consider it to be a tired franchise. Oh, they release a game every year, but they've certainly had the tailwind of the pandemic and more people generally playing games and engaging with games. But the latest launch attracted 70% more players than last year's iteration. And I think a big factor as well is they have embraced mobile. So the idea of going cross-platform, and the same can be said. Fortnite available on mobile and all major consoles and PC. Likewise, PUBG is another very popular title that's been around for a long time. So another sort of, I guess, tactic there is looking at new audiences becoming more accessible to wider audiences. So yeah, so that's I guess a whistle stop tour of some examples of games doing it right, some failures, various different strategies. So we've seen content being part of the strategy. We've seen leveraging different device platforms, as we said, with Call of Duty and Fortnite going onto mobile, but also platforms in terms of communication channels. So we're talking about Rust leveraging platform capabilities such as Twitch with their drops and things like that. Lots of different approaches, different monetization models. No Man's Sky. Here's a bunch of updates, and they see enough uptake in their their footprint, their player audience growth to keep doing that, which has been amazing. And as you mentioned, other approaches, paid DLC or the likes of Hitman, paid kind of releases, all different tactics to extend the life of your brand or your game. And any other thoughts from you, Ben?
Yeah, I just think it's going to be interesting to see how people continue to do it because clearly there is a shift this way. It's it's very expensive to churn out really high quality games, and we've seen over the past year, with delays and rocky launches that it can be difficult to try and do that quickly. They take a lot of time, and if you can focus on games that you've already released and improving those where you already have a strong player base that you can build upon, like that is the way forward. We're still always going to see big titles coming out and being worked on, but as we've talked about earlier, like Ubisoft have said, we're changing our strategy to focus on older games. We saw last year that Paradox reported that their 2019 earnings, like 87% of their revenue, came from titles released in a previous year. So it's definitely going to go that way, and I think the more and more it moves that way, people are going to have to get more innovative with the methods that they use to keep people playing their game. Because if everyone's going to start doing this, there's only so many games that you can keep playing and keep picking up. So it's going to be interesting and really exciting to see what people do to keep their games alive, because I think it's really, we're going to see the best of the creative minds start coming out
I
to
think, yeah, and I think the point you touched on there about, it is making a game is difficult, it's expensive, it takes a long time, but you've also, I guess, you can see a bit of the kind of the MVP startup mindset coming in. Is actually, can we get something smaller out sooner and prove or gauge our audience, and then iterate from there. And maybe there's, it'd be interesting to, we've got the cyberpunks that didn't do that. Obviously they had a long hype cycle and put a lot into their big bang launch. And then perhaps you've got some examples of simpler games, or releasing earlier and then using that as your platform to grow more organically rather than a big bang. And yeah, I'm sure we'll see more examples of both approaches. Obviously you're reducing the risk by taking the smaller game approach, but you are sacrificing your opportunity to build hype. But then the more people that build hype and let down their audiences are going to get more and more wary. So yeah, maybe you want to reduce that barrier to entry, make less of a splash, but build momentum. Yeah, very, very interesting subject. We spend a lot of time researching and discussing it, and
certainly do.
we've demonstrated that today. We should probably think about wrapping this up.
Yes, we could talk forever, so let's stop. Thank you, everyone who has joined us. I apologize for my internet issues at the start of the segment. Thank you for sticking with us. If you know anyone who you think would like this show, we're back every Thursday at 4 p.m. So tell them to come along. And this episode will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, and you can find all our past episodes there as well, as long as a ton of other interviews, us checking out games. So head over there. Or if you just want to say hi, we're on Twitter. So we're at EdgePlay on all of the platforms. So come see us there, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thank you very much.